President Trump just announced he's issuing an executive order requiring voter ID nationwide for the upcoming midterm elections, and he says it's happening whether Congress approves it or not. Legal. Experts are already calling this unconstitutional. States are gearing up for a fight, and this could reshape American elections as we know them. Stick around because we're breaking down everything you need to know, what this order actually does, why it's so controversial, and what happens next in what's shaping up to be a massive legal battle. All right, let's start with what just went down. Late Friday afternoon, President Trump took to Truth Social with a series of explosive posts about voting requirements for the 2026 midterm elections. In his first post, Trump wrote, "There will be a voter ID for the midterm elections, whether approved by Congress or not. Also, the people of our country are insisting on citizenship and no mail-in ballots, with exceptions for military, disability, illness, or travel." Just 30 minutes later, he doubled down with a second post saying, quote, "If we can't get it through Congress, there are legal reasons why this scam is not permitted. I will be presenting them shortly in the form of an executive order." Now, this announcement comes right after the House passed the Save America Act this week by a razor-thin margin of 218 to 213. Only one Democrat voted against party lines on this. The bill would require voters to show proof of U.S. citizenship, like a passport or birth certificate, to register for federal elections, plus a photo ID to actually cast a ballot. But here's the problem. The SAVE Act faces an almost impossible path in the Senate. Republicans only hold 53 seats, and they need 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska has already come out against it, and with Senate Democrats bowing to block the legislation, Trump's legislative path looks dead on arrival. So Trump is essentially saying, fine, I'll do it myself through executive action. And that's where things get really interesting and really legally complicated. Now, before we go further, you need to know this isn't Trump's first attempt at changing election rules through executive power. In fact, we've already seen how this movie plays out. Back in March 2025, Trump signed an executive order titled Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of American Elections. That order directed the Election Assistance Commission to require documentary proof of citizenship on voter registration forms. Sounds familiar, right? That's because it's essentially the same thing he's proposing now. And here's what happened. That order was immediately challenged in multiple lawsuits. By April, a federal judge issued a permanent injunction blocking the entire thing. Judge Colleen Kolar-Kotelly, a district court judge in Washington, D.C., wrote a pretty devastating opinion. She said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Trump doesn't have the constitutional authority to regulate federal elections. She pointed out that the Constitution's Elections Clause specifically gives that power to states first and then to Congress in certain instances. The president, he doesn't even get a mention. The judge wrote, "Our Constitution entrusts Congress and the states, not the president, with the authority to regulate federal elections. No statutory delegation of authority to the executive branch permits the president to short-circuit Congress's deliberative process by executive order." In other words, Trump tried this exact thing already and the court shut it down. So the big question everyone's asking now is, what makes him think it'll work this time? In his Friday posts, Trump claimed he has searched the depths of legal arguments not yet articulated or vetted on this subject and will present an irrefutable one in the very near future. Strong words from someone who, let's remember, is not a lawyer. Legal experts are extremely skeptical. The constitutional framework hasn't changed since April. The structure of American federalism hasn't been rewritten. So what exactly is this new irrefutable legal argument? Let's dig into why this is such a constitutional problem, because understanding this is key to everything that's about to happen. The United States has a federalist system. That means power is divided between the national government and state governments. When it comes to elections, the Constitution is actually pretty clear about who's in charge. Article I, Section 4 of the Constitution, known as the Elections Clause, as the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations. Read that carefully. Elections are prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, meaning state legislatures set the rules. Then it says Congress can make or alter those regulations. Notice who's missing? The president. The executive branch gets zero mention in the Elections Clause. This is why we currently have 50 different sets of election rules. Some states require photo ID, some don't. Some have strict vote-by-mail rules. Others are very permissive. Some require proof of citizenship to register, most don't. This variation exists because states have the constitutional authority to run their own elections. Now, Congress does have the power to step in and create uniform federal election rules. They've done it before with things like the Voting Rights Act and the National Voter Registration Act. But Congress hasn't passed a nationwide voter ID requirement. Trump is trying to do what even Congress hasn't done, and he's trying to do it unilaterally through executive action. The Institute for Responsive Government put out a brief analysis that was pretty blunt. The president doesn't control voting methods. States do. This executive order wouldn't change any rules. It just conveys the president's preferences. But here's where it gets tricky. Trump's executive order from March tried to use existing federal agencies like the Election Assistance Commission to implement these changes. He's arguing he's not creating new law, just directing federal agencies to enforce existing prohibitions on non-citizen voting. The problem? Federal judges aren't buying that distinction. Let's talk about what this would actually mean for voters if Trump's order somehow survived legal challenges. The Save America Act that passed the House would require voters to show documentary proof of citizenship to register. We're talking passports, birth certificates, or naturalization papers. Then you'd need to show a photo ID that also indicates citizenship status when you actually vote. Voting rights advocates say this would create massive barriers to voting. According to research from Voter Riders, a nonpartisan nonprofit, approximately 34.5 million Americans either don't have a driver's license or state ID, or they have one that doesn't match their current name or address. This disproportionately affects certain groups. Citizens of color are almost 4 times more likely not to have current government-issued photo ID compared to white citizens. Women who change their names after marriage often have birth certificates that don't match their current IDs. College students frequently lack the required documentation. Elderly voters who were born before hospital records were standardized sometimes don't have birth certificates at all. The executive order also targets mail-in voting. Trump wants to eliminate it except for military personnel, people who are very ill, or those with disabilities. The phrase he's used is no mail-in voting except for very limited exceptions. During the 2020 election, 43% of voters cast ballots by mail. That's over 65 million people. Many states have moved to universal mail voting systems that residents rely on. Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Hawaii, and Utah conduct their elections almost entirely by mail. Trump's order would upend those entire systems. There's also the timing issue. Senator Lisa Murkowski raised this point when she opposed the SAVE Act. She said imposing new federal requirements now, when states are deep into their preparations for the midterms, would negatively impact election integrity by forcing election officials to scramble to adhere to new policies, likely without the necessary resources. Think about that. We're talking about the midterm elections happening in just 9 months. Election officials would need to completely overhaul their systems, train poll workers on new requirements, educate millions of voters about new rules, and update registration databases all in less than a year. That's a recipe for chaos. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, Trump's central justification for all of this. The president has repeatedly claimed that widespread voter fraud, particularly voting by non-citizens, is a major problem in American elections. He said Democrats oppose voter ID because they want to continue to cheat in elections. So is there evidence of widespread voter fraud? The answer is overwhelmingly no. Georgia conducted comprehensive voter roll audits before the 2024 elections. Out of 8.2 million registered voters statewide, they found only 20 registered non-citizens. And of those 20, only 9 actually cast a ballot. 9 out of 8.2 million. The Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, maintains a database of proven voter fraud cases. Over the last 40 years, they've documented approximately 1,500 instances of voter fraud nationwide. To put that in perspective, over 152 million people voted in the 2024 presidential election alone. We're talking about a fraud rate that's statistically negligible. It's also worth noting that voting as a non-citizen is already a serious crime. Any non-citizen who illegally votes can be charged with a felony and face deportation. The penalties are severe and prosecution is a real possibility. So when Trump claims there's a scam happening with non-citizen voting, the data just doesn't support it. Multiple investigations during his first presidency failed to find evidence of widespread fraud. His own administration's officials, including former Attorney General William Barr, said there was no evidence of fraud that would have changed the outcome of the 2020 election. This doesn't mean voter fraud never happens, it does occasionally, but we're talking about isolated incidents, not the systematic conspiracy Trump describes. Election security experts consistently say that American elections are secure and that the real threats come from things like foreign disinformation campaigns and cybersecurity vulnerabilities, not from masses of non-citizens somehow voting illegally. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger political picture here, because this fight isn't happening in a vacuum. The 2026 midterms are absolutely critical. Republicans currently hold slim majorities in both the House and Senate, Historically, the party in power tends to lose seats during midterm elections. Democrats are hoping to flip one or both chambers, which would dramatically constrain Trump's ability to push through his agenda for the remainder of his term. Trump himself has framed the stakes in existential terms. In one of his Truth Social posts Friday, he claimed that if Democrats gain power, they'll immediately add 2 new states, pack the Supreme Court with 21 justices, and terminate the filibuster probably in their first week or sooner. Whether or not you think those predictions are realistic, they show how Trump is positioning this election. He's telling his supporters that nothing less than the future of the country is at stake. From Trump's perspective, voter ID requirements might help Republicans politically. Studies have shown that strict voter ID laws can reduce turnout, particularly among demographics that tend to vote Democratic young people, minorities, and lower-income voters. And even a small reduction in turnout in key swing districts could make the difference in maintaining Republican control of Congress. But there's a flip side to this strategy. By making voting access a major campaign issue, Trump might energize Democratic voters who see these restrictions as voter suppression. Nothing drives turnout quite like the perception that your right to vote is under attack. And let's talk about public opinion for a second. Polling consistently shows that voter ID requirements are actually quite popular with the American public. A Gallup poll taken before the 2024 elections found that requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote has majority support. So Trump isn't completely off base in thinking this issue could work for him politically. The question is whether the specific approach he's taking, bypassing Congress, defying court rulings, imposing federal mandates on states, will be seen as defending election integrity or as executive overreach. So where do we go from here? Let me walk you through the likely scenario. First, Trump will issue his executive order. Based on his statements, this could happen within days or weeks. The order will probably look similar to his March executive order, but might include whatever new legal arguments he's claiming to have discovered. Second, the order will immediately be challenged in court. Multiple lawsuits will be filed, probably by Democratic state attorneys general, voting rights organizations like the ACLU and the Brennan Center for Justice, and potentially even by some states themselves. Third, plaintiffs will seek an immediate preliminary injunction to block the order from taking effect. Given that a judge already issued a permanent injunction against Trump's previous attempt at this, there's a very high likelihood that the new order will be blocked as well, at least temporarily. Fourth, the case will move through the court system. District Court, Appeals Court, and potentially the Supreme Court. This process could take months or even years. But here's the critical thing. Given that the midterms are in November, courts would likely fast-track any challenges because of the imminent election deadline. The Supreme Court could play a crucial role here. With its 6-3 conservative majority, including 3 justices appointed by Trump himself, the court could theoretically rule in Trump's favor. But even conservative justices have been reluctant to expand presidential power in ways that fundamentally alter the constitutional balance between branches of government. Remember, the court ruled against Trump multiple times during his first term, including on immigration issues and claims of absolute presidential immunity. They've shown a willingness to say no to executive overreach, even when it comes from a president their own party supports. There's also the question of state resistance. Blue states like California, New York, and Illinois have already shown they're willing to fight Trump's executive orders in court. They have the resources and the motivation to do so. And because elections are administered at the state and local level, there's a real question of enforcement. If states simply refuse to comply, how exactly would the federal government force them to? Here's the bottom line. We're looking at a massive constitutional showdown over who controls American elections. On one side, you have President Trump arguing that election integrity demands immediate federal action, that states have been negligent in preventing non-citizen voting, and that he has the authority to act when Congress won't. On the other side, you have constitutional scholars, federal judges, and state officials arguing that Trump is violating the fundamental structure of American federalism, that the evidence doesn't support his fraud claims, and that this is really about suppressing votes rather than protecting election integrity. The irony in all of this is pretty striking. Republicans have traditionally been the party of states' rights and limited federal power. Now we have a Republican president trying to impose federal mandates on state election systems over the objections of state officials. Democrats, meanwhile, who have historically supported stronger federal oversight, are now defending states' rights to run their own elections. Politics makes strange bedfellows, as they say. What's certain is that this issue isn't going away. Whether Trump's executive order happens or not, whether it's blocked or not, voting access and election integrity are going to be central issues in the 2026 midterms and beyond. My prediction? Trump issues the order. It gets blocked in court almost immediately. The fight drags on through the legal system, and we end up voting in the midterms under basically the same rules we have now. But that legal fight becomes a major campaign issue that both parties use to energize their bases. The bigger question is what this does to public confidence in elections. when the president says elections are rigged and corrupt, when half the country believes widespread fraud is happening despite lack of evidence, and when the legitimacy of election outcomes is constantly questioned, that corrodes the foundation of democracy itself. Regardless of where you stand on voter ID requirements, we should all be able to agree that Americans need to have confidence in their elections. The question is whether Trump's approach strengthens that confidence or undermines it further. All right, everyone, that's the breakdown on Trump's voter ID executive order and the legal battles ahead. This story is developing rapidly, so make sure you subscribe and have notifications turned on so you don't miss our coverage as this unfolds. What do you think? Is Trump right to push for nationwide voter ID, or is this executive overreach? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and we'll discuss them in upcoming videos. If you found this breakdown helpful, smash that like button and share this with anyone who needs to understand what's happening with election laws right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay informed, stay engaged, and don't let anyone tell you your voice doesn't matter.